Everything was going fine until we got to the last 2 or 3 miles of the approach. John had noticed that he was getting a throttle stagger problem, and he started to ask me what was going wrong. It was evident we had a big engine failure problem. At that point I had to make my first big decision as the captain, which was who was going to be flying the aircraft. John, my first officer, was an experienced first officer, so in my mind I had to leave him flying the aircraft whilst I then looked after the managing of the flight deck. And as the captain, that was my responsibility. I could see the runway at Heathrow, but it seemed a long way off with no power. So we were now virtually on a glider, and we had to try and get as far as we could, because at that point we were going to impact buildings, and I calculated in my head that 100% of my passengers would die. I knew that the aircraft needed to have less drag. The full flap that we had was not giving as much lift as it was giving us drag, so I needed to trade off that drag for distance. And so I reduced the flap from flap 30 to flap 25 to gain that little bit of extra distance, and it worked. It gained an extra 51 metres, which just put us past the array of RLS aerials, which we cleared by about 40 metres. I then realised that I was actually in an uncontrollable aeroplane sliding along the ground, and it might be my time to die. And I actually said goodbye to Maria and my boys before we stopped. When I came down the slides after checking the front cabin was empty, I met the chief fire officer at the bottom of the slide, and he said, "Everyone is off." I was like, "Everyone off, okay. And how many are dead?" And he said, "No, everyone's alive." And to hear that was the biggest relief.
I think it's right to pay tribute to the calmness and professionalism of the British Airways staff, the captain, Peter Burkill, for what he achieved in engineering a landing that protected lives.
I'm delighted to say that our flight crew and our cabin crew have acted incredibly professionally, and I'm very proud of the job that they have done.
I switched the television on and just saw what landing short of the runway actually meant.
During that first month, when I was off work, when I was doing all the interviews for the investigations, there was very little information given by the company, and the media wanted to know more, and they weren't being given the information. So they started to speculate. Unfortunately, it got translated into things like I froze, that I didn't do the Mayday call, that I didn't do the evacuation call. 3 of the very important things that I did do. And that hurt. John's as good a pilot as I am. The fact that he landed the plane, I think, confused the general public, unfortunately. The teamwork was there and it worked perfectly. And then I got vilified for it. And I had to, every time I went to work, I was having to defend those actions, and it was unfounded and not fair to me.
There was just so much tension. Pete was unaware of what he was doing and how he was coming across. And I just thought that I have to make a note of these, because this man who was in front of me was not my husband.
I read it and I was shocked at how nasty I'd been to her and my family. I was very stressed out. I was very angry towards everybody. And she said, maybe it's worth both of us writing down how we feel.
People might want to read this. People might be able to learn from this. Just the whole, yes, it starts with a plane crash, but just down to how the aftermath of a crash and the situations that go on intertwine.
The accident of the Hudson River actually happened exactly 52 weeks to the day after the BA-38. And I saw it on the news, and it's another double-engine failure. And I just thought, wow, the parallels here are amazing. And then I thought, oh, he's going to be looked after. He's going to have a good year. Thank goodness for that. You know, he's done a good job. He was able to get the information over to the people who wanted to know. Just the right bits of information, just enough. to show that he wasn't in hiding, show that he hadn't done anything wrong. It was like watching a parallel universe. You know, he'd done a great job. Okay, we'd done a great job as well on the BA-38, but unfortunately, Protocol and the company I was in, they didn't want to speak out about it. And that's sad in a way, that they couldn't promote what a good job their company did, like Sullenberger was able to do. It was a good outcome, good training, and nobody died. Eventually, as a family really, we decided that it was time that I shouldn't work for British Airways anymore, that I wasn't comfortable working with British Airways anymore, and my only choice was to leave. I applied to other airlines, and I got slowly more and more rejections for interview, and it started to become quite clear that this crash wasn't going for me. It was such a high-profile crash that companies were backing away from me. I'd love to see that if this happened again to someone else, certainly in the United Kingdom, that they wouldn't have to go through what we've been through as a family. And I think if that's all I could get from this, then that would be great.